everybody, Stephanie here with the Machine Gun Nest, and today we're here with Senator Justin Reedy, who has sponsored Senate Bill 327, which would turn Maryland from a may-issue state to a shall-issue state. So tell us a little bit more about this bill.
Well, Maryland is one of only a few states that still clings to the idea that you have to prove to the state why you should be allowed as a law-abiding citizen to have a concealed carry permit. And this bill would take us to a shall-issue position, meaning that the state has to show when you apply for a permit why you should not have one. And so that's what the bill essentially does, is just makes us a shall-issue state for concealed carry permits, because I believe that law-abiding citizens have the right to keep and bear arms, to defend themselves, their family, their property. Unfortunately, right now in Maryland, it's very hard to get a concealed carry permit. And a lot of times it's biased towards if you own a business and carry a lot of cash or other sorts of extenuating circumstances. Well, that's wrong. It should be anybody who is, as I said, a law-abiding citizen that passes a background check should be able to get a concealed carry permit. The state should have to show why you shouldn't have one.
Well said, and we couldn't agree more. And what's interesting is, for those of you who might not be familiar with this process, in the state of Maryland, to apply for a concealed carry permit, you do this through the Maryland State Police portal, and you have to upload your fingerprints. You have to take a 16-hour course as directed by the state that involves knowledge about the law. It involves some range time, and then you have to go actually pass a shooting test out on the range. But the most important problem with all of this is that you have to provide a reason, a documented reason, why your life is worth protecting. Now, this is just utterly fascinating, and you can reference some of our other videos about the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin Supreme Court case about why this is unconstitutional. Why is it that me, as a white female business owner, I am afforded the opportunity to protect myself, but somebody who might not own a business or who works in any other position is considered lesser in any way? Because that's essentially what the current law is saying.
Absolutely, and I think we know in our situation that we have in the state right now, particularly as we look at the Baltimore region, there's a tremendous amount of crime, and it's afflicting areas that are not privileged. And so those folks are really at a disadvantage to protecting themselves. And so that's another reason I'm very passionate about this issue, is everybody should have the right to keep and bear arms. Everybody should have the right to have a concealed carry permit if they so choose. And the state has set up a whole structure. So it's really a situation where we need to be sure that our laws match what our Constitution says, that every life has value, every life has meaning, and everybody should have that opportunity to defend themselves, their property, and their family.
So, Senator, why is the Second Amendment important to you?
Well, look, I mean, without the Second Amendment, it's going to be hard to defend the First and all the other important constitutional amendments. Obviously, the whole Constitution is an amazing document that has led our country to be able to be the envy of the world as far as freedom, opportunity, and safety. And so for me, the Second Amendment really is something that I've always been a committed person supporting. And to me, it's an individual right, and the big debate, as you know, in the political circles is on the left, they believe it's a collective right, not an individual right. It's very clear from every interpretation of the Constitution, including what was going on in our country at the time when they wrote the Constitution. It is an individual right. Should be exercised responsibly, but it's an individual right. And so it's one of the reasons that I got involved in campaigns and politics and running for office, and I've been really committed to expanding those freedoms in Maryland. We know Maryland is a state that dramatically restricts those rights, and so this is an attempt. So often I feel like in Annapolis we get stuck playing defense. I want to be on offense, and that's why I put the bill in this year.
And I think that this is a fantastic time. I know you've been leading the charge on this effort for a long time, and some of your colleagues too have been pushing to support our Second Amendment right here in the state of Maryland. But I think now is fertile ground, especially because this New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case is going on in the Supreme Court. And if you've been following along, you can see that the outcome of this case could set a precedent for the state of Maryland here.
I'm excited. I think it's a great time to go on offense. As you mentioned, the bill has been introduced before. I've been a co-sponsor in the past, always supported it. This year I've taken the lead on it. A lot of times people go, well, it's failed before, what's the point? We have to stay on offense. And we need to present also, as you talked about court litigation, it needs to be showing that there's been an effort to try to restore this right and this value the way it should be. And so that's why we're going to continue, like I said, to stay on offense. And I'm hopeful we'll get court action. interesting you mentioned that if the Supreme Court rules, state governments may try to implement different types of restrictions. That's why it's really important to be sure that everybody that's watching this is engaged in what's happening in their local and state elections this year in Maryland, because every county and state office is on the ballot, from county council all the way to state senator, state delegate, governor. So that'll be the next fight after the court case. Is really what happens. Do we still have an unequal setup where maybe people in Baltimore or Frederick City or Rockville are like, well, you can get a concealed carry permit, but you can't carry it anywhere here. So we kind of have this is like a multi-layered thing, like it always is. We want to get this bill passed, but if the court rules, we want to be sure we're engaged in the fight that may happen, community to community.
Absolutely, and that's such a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Your voice matters. Every phone call you make matters. Every email you send absolutely matters, because I am not in favor for any of those restrictions. I would like to, us, we would love to see constitutional carry happen everywhere. So I do appreciate the steps that Senator Reedy is taking and others like him to kind of move us along and get us there. So something I want to talk about is a common misconception. Those who are a little nervous about this kind of legislation, on the fence, or just outright opposed, many falsely equate the presence of more guns and the presence of more concealed carry permit holders with more crime. Why do you think that is?
Well, look, I think a lot of folks that I run into in Annapolis, and I'm about persuasion, and you know that about me. I'm really focused on how do we persuade people that don't already agree with us to join us. Maybe they don't come 100%, but they come at least to recognize, hey, people should have the right to defend themselves. A lot of the people who represent areas, a lot of them urban areas where there's been a lot of crime historically, they view guns as the instrument of violence and why there's crime. We know the gun is not what did it. It's the person that did it, and we're trying to work in Annapolis right now to say let's put people away that are hurting people intentionally. That's another issue for another time, of course. But what we're trying to persuade them is, number one, in places like Houston and Dallas, where once Texas went to concealed carry, the crime dropped. Criminals don't like people that can shoot back, and statistically, people who have concealed carry permits in the United States are the most law-abiding citizens as far as a statistical group of any group in the country. So it's trying to have that conversation about when you empower people to have their own sort of agency and have the ability to have a concealed carry permit. A lot of people may not want to, and that's fine. But when you empower people to take control over their lives, you actually end up with more responsibility. You end up with more help. And I think it's not the only solution to what ails places like Baltimore, but if you had the people able to get concealed carry permits that wanted to help defend themselves in their community, you would see a drop in crime. And I've challenged people before the political leaders that I know that are on the opposite side of me, let's run a test. Let's do it for a little while and see what happens. I think you'd see a tremendous change.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and I think that would be a really great experiment to kind of show. But what we do have an example of states like Texas, where those crime rates absolutely have dropped, because just like you said, criminals don't like when you can shoot back. And as you were talking about Baltimore, my mind kind of went to thinking about a home, maybe a mother and her kids, both parents and their kids. The only chance that family would have against a violent intruder would be to have a legally owned firearm and the ability to protect themselves. Absolutely. To shoot back, whether that's in their home or on the street, on the way to the grocery store, or coming home from work. As was said in the opening remarks of the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, somebody brought up, what about the woman who's cleaning an office and has to walk through a neighborhood at midnight to catch the bus on her way home? Why should we restrict her right to protect herself? It's completely unfair.
I agree, and actually, it's interesting. In Maryland, the way it's set up now, if they allowed shall issue, there's a training requirement, and so really you would be someone who wanted to do that. It wouldn't be the Wild West, because they'd be able to. They would actually go get training and make sure they were ready. To me, it's not even that. And I made the joke about shooting back, but really it's about criminals knowing someone could be packing.
Absolutely.
It just gives them pause to come and take on somebody when it could be a well-trained person, or a well-trained person nearby with the ability to take action.
Exactly, and as we were talking about, your bill isn't repealing the current training requirements. Your bill is just asking to repeal the good and substantial reason, which is inhibiting law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves.
Right, because right now, to reiterate, what the state is requiring is for me to prove why I need one, and have to show different types of reasons. And it also then takes a long time to get that approval. So what we're trying to do is just say, let's have the state say, we're going to show why you couldn't have one, super criminal record, something like that. But that's what it should be. And then that would be, I think we would just see tremendous positive impact. But for the people who might be watching that are afraid of guns, it's like, it's not something to be afraid of. It's actually something that the more people understand it and understand how they work, the better it is. I do think there's a cultural divide, and that's what the challenge we have is, in my county of Carroll County, probably almost everybody has some kind of firearm in their home, and they've grown up around it. There are places where that's not the case, and the main people who've had firearms have been the bad people or the police. And we want to, of course, part of the way we do shall issues, that could help change that to where you'd see law-abiding citizens protecting their community and empowered to fully exercise all of their constitutional rights. So that's why this is such an important issue and an important bill.
It is an important bill. So what can we do to support you in this effort?
Well, I think the number one thing everybody can do is make sure you know who your state senator and state delegates are, and contact them. And we can put out information, but one place you can go is a place called mdelect.net. MD, like Maryland, elect.net. You can type in your address, and it will tell you who your federal representatives are, and your state senator, state delegates are. And you should definitely reach out to them. And I think one of the best things that people in the Second Amendment community, our advocates, can do is calmly, firmly email, not a form email, and most of the time the emails I get are not form emails. Somebody's really taking the time to write thoughtfully about what this right means to you and why you think it's so important. Don't assume that the person hates gun owners. Don't assume that they know all about the issue. Really take the time for you don't have to write an 8-page paper, but do 3 or 4 paragraphs about why you support giving people the ability to go get a concealed carry permit if they want to. And I know many people would like us to be further along than just shall issue in the state, but I would say the fact that you can honestly say to anybody who's worried about this, you can say, the state, if we do shall issue, there's still a training requirement and background checks. So it's not turning it loose. So that's something you can use if your state legislator is usually a lot of times it's a Democrat that isn't willing to support this. You can say, this is not about turning the floodgates loose. No matter how we feel about those different restrictions, it's about saying, let's just be sure that everybody has the opportunity, that's a law-abiding citizen, to have this right to defend themselves, their property, to exercise their Second Amendment rights fully.
And it's really important that you brought that up because as the law stands now in the state of Maryland, it is subjective. So who is able to receive this permit is totally dependent upon a person who is reviewing that application. All Senator Reedy wants, along like all of us, is to make the playing field fair, because as it sits right now, it isn't fair. It shouldn't be okay to you that somebody is almost arbitrarily issued a permit and somebody else isn't, based on their status, based on their socioeconomic status, which often plays a part in this as well. And so we're advocating for an even playing field. We are advocating for everybody to be able to protect themselves and their families. And if you're watching, I really encourage you to follow the advice that Senator Reedy said, engage with your local politicians, because we can really make a difference.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say about why we need this bill is, I know there's a lot of times discussion about couldn't the governor do an executive order. It seems like legally we need to change the law, because even you get conflicting legal advice, but you need to have a law change, because otherwise you're going to be yo-yoing back and forth. So it's really important that we change this law. We obviously hope the Supreme Court takes action, but we want to be engaged in this fight, and not just during this legislative session. It's very important, but also in the election, making sure that people get out and vote and help candidates and people that will stand up for this fundamental right, fundamental Second Amendment right.
So thank you so much, Senator Reedy, for coming in today. And if you're watching this, I highly encourage you to take his advice and engage with your local representatives in a meaningful way. We look forward to having you back on to talk more about this.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.